Hi, and welcome to the workshop. In this disc, we're going to take a look at captions, how you work with them, what you can do with them, and how you can use captions as a creative part of all of the shows that you make. Now, captions are not simply text that appears on a slide. Captions can be used for all sorts of interesting things, everything from title slides to conveying information. And they are a very important part of every show. Using your captions well can be just as critical to your show as any other part, whether that's images, motion, or anything else. And what you'll find is that captions are an incredibly versatile and powerful feature in both Gold and Producer that allow you to really enhance your shows through the use of text. Now, in this disc, we're going to be covering captions in both Gold and Producer, and I'll be sure to let you know when we have Producer-specific sections to look at features that are only available in Producer. Now, to begin, let's talk just a little bit about the use of captions. For this first chapter, please don't follow along, just sit back and take a look, and I'll show you some of the things that captions can be used to do. Captions make a great way to create a title slide, for example. Here, I've created a title all about butterflies. And using this caption, I can control its size, its placement, and its appearance to come up with exactly the kind of title that's going to work best for my show. Now, I can do all sorts of things with my captions. For example, I could start with something very simple but straightforward, like place a caption right here about the middle of my slide, and use it just as a very straightforward, centered title. But I can also do more interesting things, like I can left justify my caption, and then, for example, I can add a hard carriage return here, and then we have a little interesting, almost music video style beginning, and I can place that caption right down in the lower left-hand corner. Let's say I wanted to change the color to something a little bit different. I can set the color and choose, perhaps a lime green color, or perhaps something a little bit darker, almost a blackish green, that complements the image well. And then if I click on OK, you'll be able to see the placement and the appearance of that caption if we were to play it back. Now, I can also work with text effects. So, for example, I can have the caption simply appear and disappear as part of my slide, or I can add in text effects to do more interesting things with it. So let me offset butterflies just a little bit here, line it up with about, and then let's come up with an interesting way for my caption to appear. Let's say I want something that almost looks like a butterfly coming into land. We have an effect called curling that might work really, really well for that. So I can use that as my fly-in effect, and then let's say I come up with something very simple, like a fade out at the end of the slide. With that chosen, then not only do I have the appearance of my caption, but it also disappears at the end of the slide. So captions can be an incredibly powerful and useful tool that really do allow you to enhance the appearance of your show. You can select multiple different fonts, change the sizes, colors, make them bold or not, all sorts of different things that you would find in a word processor, fully functional and able to be used here. And then to make things even better, of course, you can control the position and the layout of a caption just like you would with any image layer. So it's a great feature that really goes a long way toward improving your shows. And we're going to learn all sorts of interesting features about captions as we go through the disc. Moving on to Chapter 2, we're going to take a look at fonts and how they relate to the captions that you create and how important they can be when you're laying out the captions that you're going to use as part of your show. Picking up just where we left off, here in Chapter 2, we're going to discuss briefly the importance of fonts. This is another area where I'd like you to just sit back and watch to see how we put things together and how fonts can change the appearance of your captions. So right now, we have a very simple title, simple in appearance, and relatively interesting in the layout, just to make it a bit more visually unique. Now, if you were to look at captions as people, then fonts would essentially be the clothes that they wear. The fonts really set up the character of your captions. It can make them more interesting, and it can make them more thematically appropriate for whatever type of show you're designing. Now, one of the things that we can take a look at to begin are the fonts that you have available. Any TrueType font that you've installed on your PC can be used by ProShow in your shows. This even includes more artistic fonts, like the one we see here, The Art of Illuminating, as well as the standard fonts that you find on just about any PC out there, like Times New Roman, Georgia, and things like that. Now remember, your captions really do contain the character of the fonts. So what this means is you want to try and pick fonts that work well for the theme and the appearance of your show. And there are a few basic rules that you can take from text editing that can really help you make sure your captions are consistent. One of those rules is the use of serif and sans serif fonts. Now, if you're not immediately familiar with what this means, a serif font is a font that has little additions to the edges of your character. For example, the flares at the bottom of the A, the curls at the ends of the edges of your characters. So Georgia is a serif font. A sans serif font is something like Arial. Notice that Arial has none of the serif flourishes that are normally associated with the edges of your characters. Now, typically, a serif font is used for any kind of a title or a major heading, while a sans serif font is used for the body text of whatever you're creating. And that same kind of rule can be equally helpful when you're working with slideshows. So, for example, a title such as this one is an excellent place to use a serif font. But then if you're going to have body text or credits, a sans serif font would be a good complement to that. And you can always tell what type of font you're working with just by taking a glance at the preview of the font. So, for example, we can see that Tahoma is sans serif, Times New Roman is a serif font, etc., etc. So you can make font selections to back up and support whatever kind of visual theme you're looking for. And as we move through the workshop, you're going to see much more how fonts can become a strong and relevant part of every slide that you create. Now, when it comes to installing fonts, remember that any font that you install on your PC, as long as it's TrueType, will be available for you to use in ProShow, just like you see here. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that if you do install a font, you're going to need to close ProShow and then reopen it again so that it can locate the new font that you've installed. We have some sample fonts that come with this particular workshop disk, so make sure that if you've installed those to follow along with the examples, that you restart the program after you've installed those fonts. And there are a variety of different ways to install them in Windows, differing between the different versions of Windows. So that said, as we move on with the workshop, we're going to begin talking about how you actually create and work with captions, and that's where we'll start working together. So here in Chapter 3, if you're ready to work along with me, let's take a look at exactly how we can create and configure the fonts that we include in our shows. Let's just pick any sample image from the Chapter 2 folder, and I'll simply drag and drop this into my slide list to create a new slide. Now, there are two different kinds of captions available in the program. We have show captions, which appear on every single slide in your show, and then we have regular captions, which appear on individual slides. Now, in the previous chapter, you saw me working with regular captions. To begin Chapter 3, let's take a look at those show captions I was referencing. These can be accessed by clicking on the Options icon in the toolbar at the top of the main workspace. And then, in the Show options, you go to the Captions tab. Now, the Captions options are very, very clearly defined. First, you have the caption format. This is where you can choose the font, the size, and the color of your caption, as well as determine whether it will be bold or italic. Text effects allow you to assign visual effects to your captions, just like what you saw in Chapter 1, and we'll look at those in more detail as we move on in the workshop. Caption placement allows you to determine the alignment of your captions, whether left justified, centered, right justified, or fully justified, and those are standard text layouts that you find in any text editor out there on the market. Position is the physical location of the caption within your slide frame. Outline is the same thing as you find in images, that is a visual outline around each character in your caption. And drop shadow, again, is just like image layers. It causes a shadow to appear underneath every character in your caption. Now when you start with a new caption or a new slide and you have no captions created, you can create your first new caption simply by typing into the text entry box just beneath the preview window. So let's start with something simple. Go ahead and type in butterflies. Now let's keep the configuration of this caption pretty straightforward. I'm going to change my caption placement to centered, and I'm simply going to leave my caption right there in the middle of the slide. Now notice that when I began typing, my caption appeared here in the captions list just underneath the text entry box. With a new caption created, now I'm able to configure the font, the size, the color, and other attributes of the caption. Let's change the font to something a little bit more straightforward. Why don't we find Arial? Choose Arial as your font type, and then let's change the size to 36. Go ahead and also change the color of your font to white. So here we can see that the caption is updated as we make changes to it visually right here in the preview window, so that I'm very quickly able to see exactly what my caption is going to look like as I create it. Now a show caption, as I said previously, appears on every single slide in your show. So if I click on Done, we can see that in the first slide I've created, that show caption appears right there. If I create another slide, notice that it also has the caption. So every slide that you create will have that show caption visible on it. Now you can control whether or not your slide is going to display a show caption. Let me show you how this is done. Let's open up any slide and let's make our way to the Captions and Caption Settings tab. Here in the Caption Settings tab, you will already see an entry in your captions list. Now this entry has an icon on the far left side of it that looks like a stack of paper. If you mouse over this, your tooltip will tell you that this will toggle the global state. And this says this is whether the caption will be shown on this slide or on all slides. So a show caption is a global caption. That is, it appears on every slide in your show. If you don't want it to appear on a particular slide, you can uncheck the middle box to hide the caption. Notice that now, even though it exists, it's not visible on this slide. So you can add global captions using your show options that will appear on every single slide in your show, and then you can determine which slides will not show that simply by checking or unchecking the box for visibility. If at any time you want to convert a global caption into a single slide caption, you can click on the toggle global state icon. This tells you then that you're about to change a show caption to a slide caption. It also appears on 2 other slides. If you continue, it will appear on this slide only. If you say yes, then it's removed as a show caption and it becomes a local caption on only this slide. So if I look at my other 2, notice that you no longer see that caption. Now slide captions are just as we see here. It's visible only on an individual slide, and if you open the options, it's designated by a single film cell icon that appears there on the far left. This tells you that this particular caption is only going to be seen on this one slide. Now what if you want to add additional captions? Well, then, just like you would with a layer, you can click on the Add Caption icon. This creates a new blank caption and gives you a cursor in the text entry box. So here we can type something like Butterfly Enthusiast Society. And let's say that we wanted to make this a small accent that would only appear on this slide. Well, as we can tell, it's a local slide caption. So let's start by reducing the size of this down to something that will be small, just as an accent to the slide. And then, using the preview window, just as we would with a layer, we can just place this caption wherever we want it to appear. Now, one of the nice things about adjusting the size value is that you can choose a size value that appears in the drop-down list, but if you can't find a size that does quite what you want, you can always manually enter your own size value. It's not limited to just the strict point sizes available for that font. So there we have a look at exactly how you create and adjust your captions. Moving forward, we're going to learn how to control more about the location and their appearance so that you can really harness what captions are capable of doing and understand how to use them effectively. Now that we move on to Chapter 4, here we're going to focus on the placement and the location of your captions. And the thing to remember is that where you actually place and arrange your captions is almost as important as any other setting that you use for your captions, whether that's font, size, color, any of those attributes. Its placement and its appearance has a heavy impact on the feel of your show. Now, what we have here is a starting image as well as an associated caption that can be found in the demonstration show associated with Chapter 4 that's included on your disk. Now, this first slide in the demonstration show contains an image that we're going to use as our background, and then we have both a heading and a quote. Now, if I open the details for this slide, we can see that our heading says Thoreau, and this is done in the font Flow. And then we have a quote from Thoreau: "Live each season as it passes, breathe the air, drink the drink, taste the fruit, and resign yourself to the influences of each." Now, right as we have it here, these two pieces of text are dropped right on top of one another at the bottom of the slide. Obviously, this is going to prevent us from reading anything that's happening here, and this could be considered terrible placement. We're not able to discern what's happening in the captions. We can't tell at all what's going on. So let's begin by just experimenting with a few different placement options, starting with one that I'm quite fond of. For our first placement, let's do something that's slightly unusual. Let's start by bringing our text up to the top third of the screen. Let's bring our title up as well and offset it from our actual quoted text. So here we can see the quoted text offset a bit with our title, and then we have this strange caption that just has a character in it. This character is the pipe character that you can create by holding Shift and pressing backspace on your keyboard. Now, this particular character has been increased in size so that it's quite a bit larger than it would normally appear, and this makes a perfect accent piece. If I put it just up and to the left of the text, it serves almost as a spine that the text can align itself with. To make this even more distinct, I could left justify the text and position it up against that line, just like so, so that it uses it as a backing. Let's take a look at this. Now, just by adjusting the position and placement of my captions, I have something that looks far more professional and far more visually arranged. Now, that isn't to say that this is the only option that you can use here. There are quite a few different ways that you can approach this, whether you include the pipe character or not. Now, let's take a look at a few different approaches that you could try. For our next one, let's consider a much more traditional take on the caption. Let's move our pipe out of the way here. We'll simply pull this elsewhere on the slide and then turn it off so that we can no longer see it. And let's just start with a simple centering. So what I'm going to do here is center my Thoreau heading, and with that centered, I'm going to center justify my text and align that just underneath it as well. So here I'm still using the top third of the screen, and what I've done is I've just centered my text right underneath my heading. Now, I don't find that this is as visually interesting as what we created a moment ago, but it still gets the job done better than what we started with. It's not particularly flashy or overt, but it is still effective and you can still read it, so it does get the point across. However, this can still be further refined. Why don't we try a slightly different approach by aligning things along the right edge? So let's open the options for the slide again. And this time I will right justify my heading, and I'll move this over to the right edge of the slide frame. I'll select my text and right justify that as well, and I'll simply align it just on the right edge of my heading in the same place. Once again, click on OK. And there we have a slightly different approach, but it's more visually interesting than your standard centered text. So we started with the visible pipe character, and we used that as an artistic accent with our slightly offset areas of text. Then we tried simply centering the caption as well as the heading to make everything line up with the middle of the image. And then finally, we positioned the caption and its associated text on the right edge of the slide to give ourselves a slightly different look. And as you can see, even though we never changed the image that we were working with, it gave a very different feel to each version of that slide. So caption placement does have a heavy impact on how you respond to what you see. So put some thought into it, and make sure that you really consider whether you're happy with the look and the position of your captions or not. Moving into Chapter 5, we're going to learn how to use captions to convey large amounts of information, but do it in a way that still looks artistic and in a way that complements the slide that you've created. So, for this chapter, we have one example image that we're going to use here, this picture of Ireland. And what we're going to create is a brief slide that has some information about Ireland and why you should go visit. So let's get started by creating a new slide with our image. And there we have it right there. Now, before we begin adjusting the captions, I want to move the size of this image just a little bit. So I'm going to double click on it, and in the Layers and Layer Settings tab, I'm simply going to zoom in on the image a bit just to increase its size. I've zoomed it up to about 125%. Now, with that done, let's move over to the Captions and Caption Settings tab. Here's where we can begin creating the text for our little Ireland advertisement. The first thing that we're going to need is the title of what we're working with. And since this is Ireland, let's call it simply Ireland. Now notice that the caption is very small, that we don't have much that we can see here. We first need to begin by increasing the size of this caption. Let's try something pretty dramatic, like 108. Now we're off to a pretty good start. Why don't we center this caption so that it's properly justified for us? And let's choose a font that works much better for the text that we're using. The font Art of Illuminating, which is included in your workshop disc, should be an excellent choice for this caption. And once we have that chosen, why don't we adjust its position a little bit just to make sure that it's centered there. Now with that done, we probably need to pick a color other than white, something that's going to stand out a bit more against our background. One of the best things that you can do when choosing caption color is pick a color from an image that appears in your slide. There's a very easy way to do this. If you click on Set Color, notice that there's an eyedropper icon that appears in the upper left-hand corner of your color wheel. If you click on the eyedropper, your mouse cursor becomes an eyedropper. And if you watch the color wheel, you'll see that the end of the mouse cursor automatically grabs a sample of whatever color you pass over inside the interface. This includes the image itself. So we can find a great green color from the grassy fields here in the photo and pick a green that will work really, really well for our caption. Something like that looks pretty good. With the green chosen from our actual image, we now have a caption that's automatically going to complement our image much better. To make this stand out a bit more, I can also add a drop shadow to this caption. Now, because of the very dark nature of the bottom of my image, I'll probably want to lighten this drop shadow's color to something that matches the misty look at the top of the photo where my title is located. To do this, why don't I change the color of my drop shadow to white? With that done, I now have a much more appropriate looking caption to complement the title of my slide. So, there's some of the hard part done. We now have a title in place, and we're ready to begin adding the body text. Let's create a new caption, and this one is going to tell us why we should go visit. So, this caption should say, 3 reasons to love it. Now notice that ProShow automatically uses the last caption settings that you worked with. This is done intentionally, just in case you're creating multiple captions of the same type. Now in this case, a gigantic caption size and this same Art of Illuminating font really isn't going to do the trick for us. So why don't we begin by bringing the size down to something much more reasonable, let's say about 14 point, and let's change the caption's font to something a little bit easier to read. Why don't we go with Georgia? That's a good, straightforward caption. Now, we also want to choose a different color, something that's going to complement the green but doesn't use the exact same thing. A soft yellow might work pretty well here. Just something with a bit of green in it, about like that. Let's also go ahead and disable the drop shadow. Since it's a brighter color, it should stand out quite a bit more against the grass in the background. Now, I'm also going to left justify this so that I can have it lined up and ready to add in some reasons to go to Ireland. And then I'll place my caption just underneath my title, right about like so. Now with this complete, I'm ready to add in some more captions that contain the reasons to actually visit Ireland. Now the body text for these I've prepared in advance. You can find this exact body text in the show that accompanies this chapter that's on your disk. So I'm going to create a new caption, and my first new caption is going to have the first reason to visit, and that body text is breathtaking views of the Atlantic Ocean and the lush green valleys. Now, obviously, this is going to be a little bit too large to leave at its current size, so why don't we begin by changing the size of this caption down to about an 8-point font. Now, in your preview window, this is going to look very, very small, but keep in mind that on a much larger screen, such as your television or even in the preview for your actual show, it's going to be quite a bit easier to read. Let's also change the color of this caption to white. Now, it's just a matter of positioning the caption and getting ready to have our other 2 reasons. So why don't we just center this underneath the 3 reasons to love it subtitle, and let's begin with our next reason. Our next reason I'll add in here, and this is a fascinating history full of rich traditions and values. Once again, this is going to use the same settings from the caption that we created a moment ago, so we don't have to change anything, and that's exactly why it does what it does. Now we need our third caption, so we'll add yet another one. And let's get the last bit of text that's going to go in here. Finally, delicious food and beer, including the world's most famous stout. And once again, I'm simply going to space these apart a little bit to make these reasons clearly obvious. And with that arranged, click on OK. There we can see we have our title, we have our subtitle, and then we have the text giving you reasons to visit, all oriented against a gorgeous picture of the countryside in a way that's convincing, welcoming, and enjoyable to look at. So the important things to take away from this example are the colors, first and foremost. Make sure that if you need to pick a color for your caption, you pick something from your images. It makes an excellent way to find a color that works beautifully in the captions that you have. If you don't necessarily pick a color from your image itself, then at least choose some colors that are complementary, such as what I did with this greenish yellow for my subtitle. Finally, for text that you just want to be easy to read and straightforward, white always makes a great color to use. And just remember that if you want to create line breaks like you see here, simply press Enter while you're creating your caption and move down to a new line. That allows you to precisely space and adjust exactly how you want your text to appear. Now, before we move on to Chapter 6, a few notes. If you're using ProShow Gold, feel free to move on and skip ahead to Chapter number 7. However, if you're working with Producer, I'd like you to save the show as we've currently configured it, because we're about to use it to improve upon it using the features available in Producer in Chapter 6. So again, Gold users, please feel free to skip ahead to Chapter 7. Producer users, hang on to what we've just created, because we're about to use it for some additional refinements in Producer. Welcome to Chapter 6. So, you've been working along with us thus far in Producer. Now it's time to show you some of the things that Producer can do with captions that Gold users do not currently have access to. And there's some great improvements that you can make to the appearance of your captions with Producer. Now, here I've opened the example that we just assembled in Chapter 5, and with some of the features we have available in Chapter 6, we're going to improve and change the appearance of our captions. So let's first begin by taking a look at the kinds of options that we have available in addition to the standard options found in Producer. So if I take a look at the Caption and Caption Settings tab, here we can see that all of the same options we used in Gold are still here and available. We have text effects, we have outlines and drop shadows, we can adjust the alignment and the position, but there are a few additional things that we can change here as well. We have an entire list of additional caption placement options that we can make corrections to. We can control the opacity of individual captions. That means that we can make them more or less transparent. We can change the skew of captions, that is, the angle at which they lay. We can also rotate captions, or we can rotate individual characters. In addition to this, we can control the spacing between characters and the spacing between lines. This is also known in the industry as leading and kerning. As some additional options, we can include a texture on a caption, and this is the ability to replace the standard solid color appearance of your characters with an actual image of some sort. And this can be very useful, which we're going to see as part of our improvements that we make to this particular slide. We also have interactivity options available, which allow you to create interactive captions that can be clicked on to use as links and all sorts of other things. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail later on in the workshop. For right now, we have some visual appearances and some adjustments to make to this particular slide layout. Let's start by adding a bit of a visual accent. I'm going to add in a new caption, and I want this caption to simply say 3. That is, the number 3. I'll leave the font set to Georgia, but what I'm going to do with this is begin by reducing the opacity of this character to 50%. So go ahead and do that with me as well. And then we're going to increase the size of this particular character to something quite a bit larger. I think a size value of about 48 should do the trick. Now, with the size increased, let's position this caption just over on the left-hand side of our reasons. And then let's add a little bit of rotation. We can add some character rotation to move it to the left or to the right. Let's character rotate it to the right a little bit, about 5 degrees, and then let's add a bit of skew to the left, just like so. Now, what we're creating here is essentially a visual character backdrop for our reasons. Let's go ahead and bring the size of it up a bit more. And let's try about 72. That looks pretty good there. Another thing that we can do is further reduce the opacity if you want it to become a little bit more slight, down to about 25%. Now if we click on OK and take a look at what we have here, we can see 3 reasons to accent why you should love it, and it's done in almost a 3-dimensional effect because of our skew and our slight rotation, in a way that just adds an interesting visual accent to the list. So that's the first of the improvements that we can make here. Now let's talk a little bit about our line spacing. I'm going to double click on the slide to open the options again, and let's choose step number 1, or reason number 1, for why you should visit Ireland. Now the line spacing here has got these 2 lines a little compressed together. We've got plenty of breathing room between each one of our reasons to add in a little bit of additional line spacing. So what I'm going to do here is choose the line spacing option, and I'm going to start by adjusting this just to spread my lines out a little bit more. Why don't we take it up to about 125% or so? Notice that gives you a bit more room to read those individual lines. Let's do the same thing with number 2, and you can manually type in the value you want to use there. And finally, the same thing for reason number 3. There we go. Now if we take a look at this, that's made our steps quite a bit easier to read just by adjusting the line spacing a slight amount to make that text stand out a bit more. Now, to improve things just another step further, let's enhance the appearance of our Ireland caption. To enhance this further, we're going to add a texture to it. So here's what we're going to do. Go ahead and click on the toggle box next to the Use Texture on Caption option, and then notice that we have 2 selections we can make here, either gradient or image. Let's use an image in this case. So choose Image as your texture type, and then click on Browse. Now, since the images for the workshop are part of a media source package, go ahead and click on Add from Media Source. Locate the Exploring Captions option and click on Open. From here, we're going to go into Chapter 6, into the Image folder, and find that same image of Ireland that we're using as a background. Go ahead and click on OK once you've located it. Now notice that the appearance of our text begins to reflect our image. We have a scaling option that's available for the texture you use, and each one affects how that image appears inside your caption. Fill character means that a different version of the image shows up in every individual character of your caption. So that means that each character you see there has a full image texturing it. Fill caption means that you use one version of the image to fill the entire caption. Finally, fill frame means that the image fills up the entire slide frame and the caption simply reveals its location wherever you place it. Along with these adjustments, you can also change the zoom value so that you can see more or less of that texture that you're using on your caption. So what we can do here is, by making clever use of our texture, we can adjust the zoom value to control exactly how we're going to see our caption text. So for this effect, let's use Fill Frame, and let's adjust the zoom value until we can clearly see the Ireland text spelled out in landscape, but the mist at the top starts to obscure the look of the letters, just like we can see there. With that done, go ahead and click on OK. Now you can see that we have a very interesting title that captures the same look of our image and that same sort of misty, distant appearance at the top of the slide. Then from there, we've accented and enhanced the appearance of our steps and added a nice artistic visual accent to the edge of the slide. Now, if you take a look at the demonstration show that we've included on the disk for producer users, you'll find that there are a few extras that we added there that you can take a look at and also work on your own once you understand how to do this kind of thing. Now that we've learned how to make interesting looking captions that sit still on the slide, let's talk about captions that actually have motion effects to enhance their appearance. We're going to begin by working with a simple blank slide that contains some text that could be used as a title sequence. So to do this, here's a handy shortcut. You can right-click in your slide list, choose Insert, select Title Slide. This will create a blank slide and automatically take you straight into your caption options. So what we're going to create here is a simple title slide with the name of a company and then a little bit of an interesting embossed character that will appear in the background. So let's get started with our first caption. This one is going to say Perfecta. Go ahead and type that out all in caps. Now we'll leave our font as Georgia, but we need to come up with a size that's going to work a little bit better for something that we want to center in the middle of the screen. So let's go ahead and increase the size of it to about 24 points. And then let's position this caption on the left side of the slide, just like so. Now, we need a second new caption. Let's go ahead and add another one. And this time, let's type in Productions. Just like that. Again, all in caps. With that done, let's position it to the right of our existing caption. Now, here we can see that the size might be just a little bit too large, so let's reduce the size of the caption down to about an 18-point font. Do the same for each one of them, and then we can line them up together right here in the middle of the slide. Just like so. Now, as part of the visual arrangement, let's come up with a little bit more interesting color to use for our Perfecta name. Let's go ahead and change that color to sort of an orangish yellow, something about like so. Now, with this done, we've got a great start to a title slide. From here, we're going to improve this by adding some motion. And motion comes in the form of text effects. As you saw in Chapter 1, text effects make your captions really have a bit more life. It brings them out and allows them to really enhance the scenes where they're used. Now, text effects are broken into three components. You have fly in, which is how the caption appears at the beginning of the slide, normal, which is what the caption does while the slide is playing back, and fly out, which is how the caption makes its exit at the end of the slide. So what we're going to do here is create an interesting effect where these two captions come in across one another from either side of the slide frame. So what we want is we want Perfecta to come sliding in from left to right, or from right to left rather, and then we want Productions to come sliding in from left to right. So let's see how we can set this up. The best way to set your text effects is to click on Browse next to the effect that you want to create. In this case, we'll start with Fly In, so select Browse. Now you're given a list of all of the different text effects that we have available. You can see that we have a huge range of them. Spring in, pan right, grow in, all sorts of things. So, what we can do here is make a decision based on what we think looks best for our caption. So we have things like spring left, we can do spring right, we can come in from the top. We have all kinds of different options. The one that's probably going to work best for us here is elastic left. Notice that the text comes in from the right side of the frame, just like we wanted, and then comes to a stop. Now, one of the great things here is that once you've made a selection for your fly in effect, you can click on the browsing drop-down list at the top and choose the other effects that you want to configure. In this case, we'll skip right down to the fly out effect. And why don't we go ahead and have this caption go away the same way it came in, elastic right. With that done, click on Apply, and there you can see that the effects have been applied to your caption. Now let's do the exact opposite for the production caption. So now that we know what we're working with, for the fly in effect, I can choose elastic right, and then for the fly out effect, I can choose elastic left, straight from the drop-down list. Now let's play this back to make sure it does what we expect. The slide begins, the captions slide in over the top of one another, and then they make an exit over the top of one another. So we're off to a great start. The only thing that we have left to do is bring in our embossed character that's going to make things look a little bit more visually interesting. So, let's add a new caption, and this caption is just going to be a very simple capital P. Now, since we want this to appear like an embellishment, let's find a font that works really well for that. It's a particular font here that does a good job, and that's Chopin's script. It looks very much like a detailed hand script. With that chosen, let's increase the point size. I'm using the mouse wheel to do this, to something that's quite a bit more substantial and fills up our slide frame. That looks pretty good right about there. And then let's come up with a color that doesn't dominate the rest of the appearance on the slide. So click on Set Color, and let's just use a really dark gray. Something like that. Then click on Set Color. Now with that done, all we need to do is come up with an effect for the entrance of this particular caption. So for this one, let's click on Browse next to Fly In, and why don't we use something like, how about a fade zoom in? Just like so. And then for our fly out effect, Let's just use something else that's pretty simple, like a fade out. With that done, click on Apply, click on OK, and we should have a pretty solid looking title slide. We see our text come in, our P zoom in, and then everything fades out. Okay, let's take a look at one more additional example title slide. Again, we're going to insert a blank title slide, but I'm just going to put a blank slide between these two just to add a little bit of differentiation so that we can see them all individually. And for this one, we're going to create a new slide with this image right here of the couple on the motorcycle. So we'll drag this into the slide list to create a new slide. And let's begin by double-clicking on the slide, and let's just go to the Layers and Layer Settings tab and change the scaling of this photo to fill frame, just like so. Now we're ready to begin configuring our captions. Now for this one, we're going to have 3 individual captions. We want the title for this to be Night to Remember. Now each one of these is going to come in from a different direction, and then we're actually going to use a normal effect as well, just to accentuate things a little bit. So let's start with our first caption, Night. Now notice it's using the same caption settings we had from the previous P that we created. Let's choose something that's not quite so overwhelmingly large, maybe about a 16. Or let's take it up to a little bit larger than that at about 48. So there we have Night. Now I like this particular font, but let's go with another orange color, something that really complements, similar to what we made before. And then let's add a drop shadow to this as well to make it stand out, and change the drop shadow color to black. Now with that done, before we set up any motion here, let's just position this where we want it to appear. And let's move on and create our next caption. This one is going to say simply to, so type in TO, and let's change the appearance of this one. I think we'll change the font here to a Georgia. And we can keep the size of it pretty substantial. We might bring it down just a little bit. And let's change the color to its default white. Then we'll position this one just underneath the G in Night. With that done, we have one more caption to add, and this one will say Remember. Now again, we're going to pick a slightly different font for this. Why don't we choose something like Times New Roman? And let's adjust the color a little bit, maybe a blend between that orange and the white, so we'll have kind of a yellowish color here. Maybe something that's not quite so yellow. That looks pretty good right about there. And then let's position this one so that it appears just between Night and 2, just like so. Okay, so we have our basic appearance of our captions. Now we're ready to configure the motion. Let's start with Night. What we want Night to do is come panning in from the left side of the slide, moving right, and then we want it to slowly slide in a right direction until it then continues to pan off of the slide. And we have just the kind of effects to do this. Starting with the fly in effect, why don't we pick a pan right? So it slides in just like so. So that's getting us started. Now for our normal effect, we have a particular effect called slide right. Notice that the caption just slides to the right slightly as it's sitting in place. Then finally, for our fly out effect, once again, why don't we go and locate pan right, just like so. So our caption will come in from the left, continue to pan to the right, and then zoop off the slide at the very end. With that set, let's move on to 2. Now we want 2 to do the exact opposite. We want it to come in from the left. So for the fly in effect, I'll click on Browse. And for this one, we'll use a pan left. Then for the normal effect, we'll use a slide left, just like so. And for the fly out effect, we'll use another pan left. With that set, now we're finally done to close it out with Remember. This one we want to come in from the bottom and move off of the top. So to do this, I'll click on Browse next to Fly In, and what we want to use here is a pan up, so it comes in from the bottom. Then for the normal effect, we want to use a slide up. And then finally, for the fly out effect, once again, we'll choose another pan up. All right, with all of our movement effects configured, let's take a look at this slide. So we see each of them come in, slide by, and go out. Now, it helps to have a little bit more slide time here so someone can actually read what we've created. So again, night to remember, slides by, and then out they go. Just like so. Now, if you take a look at the demonstration show included with Chapter 7, you'll find that we also have some additional uses for captions, things like creating your own credits slides, and some variations on different caption motion. So once you become comfortable with using your text effects to create motion, you can take a look at those enhanced examples to see how they were put together. Producer users, keep in mind that you can also use caption motion with keyframes in Producer. That won't be covered in this disc, but if you're interested in learning about keyframes, please take a look at our Keyframing Workshop DVD. Now that we've moved on to Chapter 8, we're going to discuss how your timing of your captions and transitions between your slides can tie into how you work with your captions. So a common question that's found is how exactly do you make a caption appear across multiple slides? That is, if we wanted to have a caption appear in this slide, and we also wanted it to be visible in slide number 2, how do we go about doing that? And that's where the use of transition becomes important. So what I'd like to start by doing is first just arrange a transition that will work well between these two images. So I'm going to click on the transition icon, and let's find something that makes a good and suitable transition between the two. Perhaps we could use horizontal bars. That should work pretty well. So pick horizontal bars on the right side of your transition. Alright, so now we have a transition in place, and if we play this back, we can see one slide, and then we bring in some horizontal bars, and we move on to the next slide. Now, what we want is a caption that's going to appear on both slides. So here's how you go about setting this up. We're going to start with slide number 1 by creating a new caption. And let's have this caption say, colors. Now, before we do anything else, let's position and arrange the appearance of the caption. For this one, I'm going to go back to that Chopin script font that we used in the previous chapter. And why don't we increase the size of it a little bit, something a bit more bold like this. Let's change the color back to white. And let's leave it just where it appears, right there on the slide frame. Now, what happens if we just leave it as it is here? With no effects in place, we simply play the caption. We can see it at the beginning of the slide, and then as we move on to the next slide, it disappears. We can't have the same caption play on both slides, but we can use an interesting little effect to make it appear as if it's the same caption on both. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to open the options for this slide number 1, and then I'm going to move my options window up a little bit so that I can see my slide list. From here, I'm going to left click on slide number 2 in the slide list, and then right click on my caption and select Copy to Selected Slides. This is going to make an exact copy of the same caption right here on my second slide. So it's in the same place, same appearance, same everything. It's an exact copy. Now we're still not quite there yet. Watch what happens. If I play this back, we can see the first caption and then it disappears. We have our transition, and then the second caption appears. To avoid this, we have to make the caption become part of the transition. To do this, we can open the options for the first slide, and you'll see that there's a third icon that's just to the right of the visible icon. And that is whether the caption appears above or below the transitions. By default, it appears above. But if you click on the icon, notice that the T becomes obscured, and this means that the caption now appears below the transition. That makes it part of the transition process, which is going to help us blend these two together. Now I'll do the same thing for the caption on slide number 2. Watch the difference now. I play the slide back. You can see the transition take place, but the caption appears to remain right where it is. That's because it's part of the transition. Now, if you want to make this effect even more seamless, you can pick a transition that continues to include it as part of the process. For example, a billboard. If I choose a billboard transition, then again, you can see that the image changes, but the caption appears to be left exactly where it is. So using the above or below transition toggle with an exact duplicate of the same caption from one slide to the next allows you to make it appear as if a caption continues to play even when you've moved between slides. Now, what about doing the exact opposite? Let's say that you want a caption to only appear for a certain part of the slide and then disappear before the image goes away. We can do that too. Let's insert a quick blank slide between the example we just put together. And now let's create a new slide with this image of some ruins. Let's do a little bit of visual arrangement on this image. I'm going to go to my Layers and Layer Settings tab and just reduce the size of it a little bit so that it doesn't fill up my entire slide frame. And that's given me a lower third of area to display my caption. From here, I'll go to my Caption and Caption Settings tab. Now I'm going to create a new caption that says very simply, Ruins, all in caps. Now with this caption created, I'm going to need to come up with both a good size and a good font. Now I have one particular font in mind that should work really well here, and this is it right here. This is a pretty detailed font. If you don't have this one available, which I believe should be included for you, then we also can choose something like a Palantino linotype. It's another good one for this. So with that chosen, now we can position this caption at the bottom of the slide, and let's pick an orange type color for it, something about like this. And I'll reduce the size of it just slightly. So with that done, I now have my text in place. Let me give it a fly in effect of a simple fade in and a fly out effect of a fade out. And now with that done, what we're going to do is we're going to make an exact copy of this slide. Let me change the slide time to 3 seconds. So I can make a copy by right-clicking on it, choosing Copy, and then I'll right-click next to it and select Paste. Now I have an identical copy of the slide, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open the options for the slide and simply disable the Ruins caption on the second slide. So now when I play this back, what we'll see is the image appears and the caption fades into view, and then as we reach the end of the first slide, the caption disappears, but the image remains in place. And that gives us the ability to either display a caption across multiple slides or display a caption for a limited time with a single image. Now again, producer users, take note that caption keyframing allows you to do this kind of thing within an individual slide rather than having to use multiple slides. And again, if that's something you're interested in learning, you can learn how keyframes work by taking a look at the keyframing DVD that we have available. In our final chapter of the workshop, we're going to take a look at a few interesting and special uses for captions. These are things that you can do using captions that aren't considered typical construction in a show. The first example is something that both Gold and Producer users can do. However, I'm using Producer to demonstrate the feature. And this involves creating a caption that can help you make a digital proofing show. Now, in a lot of cases, if you're going to make a show that contains proofs of images that you've taken, you want your customer to be able to see the names of those images so that they can tell you which ones they want. And thankfully, we give you the ability to make captions using macros that can help you create captions showing the file name very easily. To do this, we're going to create a show caption. So click on the options at the top of the toolbar, and here in the Show Captions category, we're going to create a new caption, but rather than typing in text, we're simply going to click on Insert Macro. This brings up different macros that we can use to create certain text effects within a caption. I'm going to change my macro type to predefined macros, and notice that I have a few options that appear here. File name with extension, file name only, extension, and all sorts of other information about your files. So let's say we're going to use file name with extension. Notice it tells you that the macro for this is \F, and then we click on Add and Close. This now creates a caption with that \, and F in place, and from here we can customize the appearance of this caption as it will be on the slide. So let's choose something simple for this. Why don't we go back to Arial And let's reduce the size of this caption down to something a bit more manageable, like about 12 point. Why don't we position it in the lower left-hand corner? And let's just give it a nice white coloration with a black drop shadow. So with that done, now if I click on Done, notice that on every single slide in my show, I'm able to see that file name. Now it does need a little bit of an adjustment, so if I go back into my options, from here I can verify that I've left justified my caption, and I can also pull it over enough so that I have plenty of room to see the file. And with that done, now we can see the name of each image in my show, and it's automatically getting that name from the name of the file that's being displayed. So if you were to make a show arranged in this manner, your user could watch the show and then simply copy down the names of the files that they want to buy from you if they're buying prints or something like that. So it makes an incredibly useful way to make a digital proofing show. Now, an additional special use that can be really valuable to producer users comes in the form of caption interactivity. Caption interactivity allows you to make certain actions occur when people click on your captions. Now, this is something that works only with executable or PC-based shows. So, to make an interactive caption, first you need a caption. So, let's create a caption that says something simple like, "Email me." Alright, so we've made this caption. We can place it here on the slide. And then, to make it interactive, we're going to come to the Caption Interactivity section in the lower left-hand corner, and we choose an action for it. We have all sorts of actions available: toggle pause, resume pause, go to next slide, go to previous slide, but we also have very useful things like write email. If you select write email, you can then type in a destination email address. support@photodex.com. Now, when you're playing through the show and you reach the slide that contains this caption, what you'll notice is that the caption can be interacted with. This will cause it to open their system's email client and then compose an email to the target that you provided. So caption interactivity is just a simple matter of choosing the action and then selecting the destination. You can do the same thing for a website. So for example, we can create a caption that says, "Visit my website." And then for this caption, we'll change the action to open URL, and we'll change the destination to www.photodex.com. And with that done, if we play this back once again, you can see that Visit My Website is now an active link. Now once again, it's important to remember that caption interactivity only works with executable-based shows or web shows. If it's a show that you watch on your computer, such as a web show, an executable, auto-run CD, something like that, these links will operate. If you try and use this on a DVD player or a Blu-ray disc or something like that, because they have no ability to interact and open links, they won't actually do anything beyond display the text. So keep that in mind when you're making your shows. But remember that caption interactivity can be an excellent way to make your show interactive or allow people to contact you at the close of your show. I hope you've learned quite a bit about exactly how to operate captions in both ProShow Gold and Producer. I hope this is going to help you become far more comfortable when it comes to working with captions, and I hope it's given you some ideas for how you can enhance your own shows with text in both informational and artistic applications. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again in another workshop DVD.